In our culture today, sexual purity in young kids and adults is becoming more and more rare. Our world has sexualized much of what our kids are exposed to. Sex and immoral things are heavily pushed in TV shows and movies and music. Mainstream media is trying to normalize sex outside of marriage. They're trying to normalize pornography and other impure things. Not only are they trying to normalize these things, but they're succeeding. They're not just trying. Many schools today don't even teach something like abstinence. Instead, they're teaching safe sex because they claim kids are going to have sex, so why stop it? This doesn't line up with the Bible. Sexual purity is something that God makes very clear is important for a Christian. There are bounds placed upon the sexual relationship. Sex is a touchy subject because we don't want to expose our kids to it too soon, but we don't want to wait too long either. Our kids are going to learn about sex one way or another, either from us or someone else. Sex is something that kids are learning about and finding out about at younger and younger ages, it seems. So it's important that we tackle the topic at the right time. So when do you start talking to your kids about sexual purity?
As far as just laying the base layer down, when our children were younger and they were old enough to understand the concept of marriage, people were married, this or that. We talk about, marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a commitment for life, and that, married people have babies. Now, you don't have to go into any details, but you lay that groundwork, and I think it helps them digest things that they're taught later in life.
Well, Bridget and I are of the opinion that the foundational lessons about sexual purity really start with understanding that when we're out in public, there's certain parts of our body we just don't expose. So you can start that really young, God, there's a standard of dress and modesty, and all of that is related to how we present ourselves when we're out among people. And so if you kind of starting at, when they're just old enough to get out and observe, and they're dressed and they're not just running around naked or nearly naked, then as they grow older, they start wondering why that is when they've got friends that are not dressed. And so some of those questions start coming up, and then that leads to discussions about more details about the sexual relationship and just about marriage and having kids and all that. That really, at least for us, I think that's where it's started. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, our world is putting sex in the forefront of people's mind. Everywhere you look, you find worldly things that are sexualized and inappropriate. TV shows, movies, music, it's everywhere. It's so easy for kids to access these things nowadays if they want to. So how do we protect our kids from the impure world that they're surrounded by?
You have to monitor most everything. You fast forward things on TV. We use filtering devices on our TV. We use TV Guardian and VidAngel. Both are great devices. TV Guardian works with muting language, bad language, profanity, God's name in vain. VidAngel works with movies, with anything. We use it for Amazon Prime and Netflix. And we have passwords that only we know. So we know what they're going to be watching on those things. We have blocked internet sites. We have set filtering on their phones. We know the passwords to everything on their phones. We made them sign electronics contract with us. Made them sign it, an initial, that these devices, these iPads, these iPhones are ours, and we are letting you have them, but under these restrictions. And if you don't abide by these rules, they become ours again. And so that's worked. Also knowing what they're reading in school is important. But really, you have to monitor everything, and know that they also know that if anytime I say hand over your phone, then you've got to give it to me, because I'm going to be looking at what messages you've gotten and what sites, internet sites you've been visiting. et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, you can get on YouTube and there's bad things popping up on the side. I mean, we had to block YouTube for crying out loud on one of our kids' phones because of all the stuff popping up. I mean, it's everywhere.
And you don't even have to search for it. It'll just
It's
pop
everywhere.
up after you watch one video that's clean, you know?
And the thing is, we've told the boys, if a kid says, hey, look at this on my phone, be careful about what they're about to show you, because once you get that visual image in your head of something impure, you can't ever erase that. Can't erase it, and so you've got to, I don't think sometimes parents take this serious enough, the long-term damage this stuff can cause men and women who are wrapped up in pornography because they were exposed to pictures they should have never been exposed to, at an early age. It's scary.
I would say, like Lori said, VidAngel is the best $10 we spend every month.
Absolutely.
Best $10. You watch Netflix, you watch Amazon Prime, mutes out the cuss words, it deletes out the footage of any immodesty or
Yep.
anything like that. Best $10. If you want to keep your kids pure as long as you can and innocent, that's the best $10 you can spend. Another thing we do, and this is an area of judgment, I don't bind this on everybody, but we don't allow our children to sleep over at other people's houses. We just don't do it. Laurie and I both, we did it when we were young, and both of us were exposed to stuff
Really
that we don't
bad
want our
things.
kids exposed to, and it was almost always at sleepovers, almost every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one thing we do.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
Movies,
And I know
magazines.
not everybody will agree with me on that, but in our mind, it's the right thing to do.
Another aspect of that has crossed my mind over the years, I don't think I appreciated this until probably Braden was older, but I started thinking about when I was teenager, preteen, and some of my first exposure to impure images and things like that. And back then there wasn't internet, there weren't cell phones, but it was still prevalent, and it was, my exposure to it came through kids next door or friends I had, that had access to that kind of stuff. And what dawned on me at some point along the way was that Braden would be just like that, as much as I would try to protect him, that the devil's going to find an inroad, he's going to try to expose him to something. And what I wanted for Braden is and now really for all my kids, but it dawned on me with him first because I could relate to his experience and his age. But what dawned on me is that he needs to know that coming to me to talk about those temptations is okay.
Mhm.
It's safe. I'm not going to criticize. He's not going to be in trouble because he comes to talk to me about something he's been exposed to. And that's not a sense of security I had when I was younger. So that safe place, I think Lori mentioned this earlier when we were talking about a different subject, but that home is a safe place. The temptations in the world, the home's a place where, boy, if I ever disappoint my kids by them finding something impure that I've left behind for them, that's me putting that chain around their neck. That's me causing them to stumble into sin. And I never want that to happen. Instead, I want them to feel comfortable to talk to me about the temptations they face outside the house. And that'll hopefully be a place that, will offer that freedom from guilt.
The Bible talks about guarding your eyes. There's a lot of passages about that. Son, guard your eyes. And one thing I appreciate so much is sometimes you can't always filter something, right? Or you're out in public, there's a billboard, you have to drive by it. It's impossible not to see it. But one thing I've noticed that Chris has always done that I appreciate, and our boys have now emulated, is he looks away. just teaching them to guard their eyes, look away from that immodest woman, look away from that horrible billboard or those scantily clad cheerleaders, look away. And so now I see my boys doing that. When they see something bad, I see them turning their head. Because again, you can't always protect them from that. You can't filter everything.
Obviously, as our kids get older, they're going to begin dating. And when this happens, sexual purity becomes much more important. It's easy for kids to find themselves in potentially compromising situations when they begin spending time with that very close person of the opposite sex. It becomes very easy to compromise in those situations unless you're prepared for it. So, how do you handle dating with your kids and prepare them for those situations?
Well, this is an area where there's a lot of judgment, right? And this is an area where I think we've made a couple of mistakes along the way, a little bit. We've so far only had one child who actually has actively dated someone, and that's okay with us. We're not ashamed of that. I think that's really a good thing. I tell my girls all the time that you really need to be the kind of girls that will be a special treasure for your husband. And the fact that you're not out dating a bunch of different guys, whoever you end up marrying is going to really appreciate that about you. And so that's one aspect of it. With regard to how do we as parents handle dating with our kids, I'm really of the opinion that it's a best practice that you just don't allow alone one-on-one time with a teenage boy and a teenage girl. It's okay for them maybe to go out and eat together, be in a public setting like that, but there's a lot of caution that has to be exercised because they'll escape off into some private place if you're not careful. So anyway, it's just really important that kids understand the dangers and that you understand as a parent that even though they may understand the dangers, the passion of the moment can sweep them up pretty easily. And so giving the kids opportunities to bring whoever they're interested over to the house or invite them over to the house, having transportation arrangements where maybe there's not compromising situations that potentially will be there. Those are just some areas of judgment that we've tried to be.
Or they have to call when they get to the place and when they leave and when they get to the next place, and you know about how long it takes to get there.
Yeah, if there is. Yeah.
One thing that I did that I think can be helpful is when your kids aren't dating yet or aren't in a relationship at that point, ask them to write a list of everything they want one day in a spouse. I had a list of 36 things. I kept it on a sheet of paper. I kept it, in a special box. And when I would date someone, I'd pull it out sometimes just to see how they compare to my list. And the reason why it's important not to do it when you're dating someone is that list would change according to that person. But if you have that list of what you're looking for, I want them to be a good father. I want them to be my best friend. I want them to always put God first and worship and, these things. And you can compare later,
I think of 1 Corinthians 15:33, which we ingrain this in our kids' heads. It says, "Do not be deceived, bad company corrupts good morals." You don't want to date people or potentially marry somebody who's going to influence you to do wrong. I mean, you don't want to be married to that person, so why waste your time dating them? That's what we tell our boys, And I think that's the importance, too, of, dating Christians, dating somebody who loves God. If you're both putting God first and trying to go to heaven, if you can do that for each other, rather than dating someone who doesn't put God first, and it's stark contrast there.
Well, thanks for your input on that discussion. I have a few more topics to discuss.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page for notifications about more content like this.